So this is very important concept. Please understand what is the transaction status and how to do that. Okay, so here it is. Let's go into arguments. Let's see one by one and then let's understand. In config is the complete config file that we are reading. That's the Excel file. In transaction item. So right now it's a data row. Okay, but what if it is a orchestrator queue? Then the transaction item will be changed to, or by default it will be queue item. Okay, retry number, IO retry number is something that we will use only when we are using um, data rows, or other than orchestrator queues. If we are using anything, then we will get to use retry number. Okay, so transaction number is also something that we use for maintaining the state. For example, if there are 30 items and in that 30 items we are running 25th item, how can we get to the next item? So that is done using transaction number. So transaction field 1, transaction field 2, and transaction ID. So these three are custom fields. Okay. So for example, we are having calculator as an example, and in that calculator row, column 1 is transaction field 1. We can assign it. Column 2 is transaction field 2, and transaction ID is some unique value that we can assign. So in system exception and business rule exceptions are two types of exceptions. So everything will have their own argument types and their own data types. So important things to consider in each and every project is in transaction item, that is of type, what type of it is it, and system exception and business rule exception. Okay. So now in this particular variables or arguments, if there are any issues, please let me know them. I hope there are no issues since everyone are silent. Okay, please close the arguments panel. Let's go into variables panel. So if you see, there are no variables here because everything we are doing with arguments. There are no specific XAML file argument variables. Okay, but understand the flow first. Can you go to the top? This is a flow chart. Now, when the first thing that we are going to check is if we are having a system exception or not, the success state. Can you click on success state? Yep. So here we are checking if business rule is nothing and system exception is nothing. Okay. So when business rule is nothing and system exception is nothing, it directly says that we are good with the process and we don't have any issues. The process is successful. So we are doing a negative scenario. Okay. Scroll down. So on the left side, we have success items where what we need to do if it is successful. On the right side, don't go inside yet. Let's go back. The second one that you're seeing is the second condition where we are checking if that is a business rule exception. If that is a business rule exception, yes or no. On the left side, that is true. On the right side, it will be system exception. So first we are going to check if it is business rule or system exception. If that is successful, then it means that there is an exception. But if both fails, that means that there is no exception and everything got successful. Now in business rule exception, Business rule exceptions are of type business rule exceptions. Okay, the type of it is specifically business rule exception. And system exception is any kind of exception other than the business rule exception. Those three things you just need to understand. And the last one, increment transaction index. So after completing business rule exception or success exception or success item, we need to move into the next item. See, if there are 10 rows, we need to go to first row, then process it, second row, process it. So how are we maintaining the transaction number? So that will be incremented in increment transaction index. The last one. The last one, can you open that? Yeah. So here you can see the IO transaction number is IO transaction number plus one. Can you please hover on that? Just hover on it. Hover on it, it will show you the values. The next one, transaction number plus one. So when we are starting with a new item, then it will be retry number of 0. But if we are continuing the same item, then the retry number will be incremented. But important point to see here is with the retry numbers. Okay, go to set transaction status or main. Yeah, scroll down. So where we will have retry. We need not have retry in success because that is already completed. We will not have retry in business rule exception because that is a custom exception that we raised. There is no need for us to retry it. But if we want to have, or if we have system exception, that's when we are going to have a retry concept. Open that. Just understand the logic in here. First thing is it a queue retry or not? Okay, hover on the right of SN. Okay, that's correct. Just hover on it. So here what we have in transaction item is not nothing. It means that there is some data, and also in transaction item of get type. Is it a queue item or not? So why are we doing that? To see if that is a queue item. So by default, queue item will have a retry concept. We need not maintain a separate retry concept. But if we don't have it, then we need to write custom code. Can you please open the commented out code? Yeah. So see here, when the transaction item type is queue data row, we cannot set the transaction for it because that is related to queues. Okay, and IO retry number will be assigned directly to IO in transaction item of retry number. So when we are using queues, we will be using something like transaction item of specific content, where we are getting data from it, right? So in the same way, it has a property called retry a number as well. So it can fetch the item from it. Scroll down. So earlier this retry current transaction used to be in a single file, but in everything need to was in a single file. But since that is a separate workflow, different arguments, we are making that in a new file. Open import arguments. So what are we sending? We are sending config again, retry number, transaction number, system exception, queue retry. Just close it. Let's go into the flow and let's see. Again, here there are conditions. Retry transaction. What is it checking? Open that or hover on it. So if the max retry number that's there in orchestra config, if you see in the config, we are using max retry number, right? So if we are using that max retry number, then we need to check. So on the right side, if you can see, IO transaction number will be incremented by 1. So this is the second place where the transaction number will be incremented. The first place is 6 when we are having success and business rule exceptions. This is the third place because there are 3 retries are already completed or any number of retries are already completed. and we need not work on it again. That is the reason we are having an increment of transaction number. On the left side, we are going to see max retry numbers or not. So let's assume that on the first row, we are having a system exception and we retried it for 3 times. So we are checking if the retry maximum retry is completed or not. If the max retry is completed, there is no need to retry it again. Okay, so that is on the left side. On the left side, you're going to see max retry is completed. So just retry number to 0 and increment the transaction number. So this is the fourth place where we are incrementing the transaction number. Okay, the first place is at success. Second place is at business rule exception. Third place is when we are having no retry required, and the fourth place is when retries are completed. On the right side, if you see, there are hover on the hover on the condition. If that is the queue retry or not. So in the previous workflow, we have checked if it is a queue retry, right? So we are checking if it is a queue retry or not. So if it is a queue retry, then by default, the values will be available. There is no need for us to update the number or queue retry number because that is available by default in orchestrator. So if it is a queue retry, then on the left side, you can see IO transaction number equal to IO transaction number plus 1 again. So this is the sixth place. You're going to see the increment. On the right side, you can see IO return number equal to IO return number plus 1. So the reason why we are having return number here is because this is not an orchestrator queue, we may need to retry it again. Okay, the maximum retries are not completed and we may need to retry. That is the reason we are retrying it. So that is all about set transaction status and retry current transaction. I know that you are pretty much confused, but please ask the questions.
Vajrang Ullas here.
Yeah, Ullas, tell me.
If we are defining the retry count in config file and in orchestra also, then how many times it will retry?
So retry will only check if the item is not a queue item. So if the item is a queue item, then whatever the number might be in a config file, it will not work because see even in the condition, if it is a queue retry, it's not updating the items, right? Okay. So that max retry number or anything will work only if it is a item or the transaction item is other than a queue item.
Okay.
Okay. Next question, please.
I'm sorry.
Please go ahead with your questions. Check with the flow and ask any question or any doubt you have, please ask it now. Because the next workflow, when we are working with queues, if the transaction items will fail, they will get retried and you need to understand how they are getting retried. Okay, if you don't have questions, let me pull in Shankar.
Hey, Vajran.
Hi, Shankar. Shankar, how can we set the default retry number?
Default retry number, it is if it is a queue, like if we use the orchestra, then we uh, define orchestrator. If you're not using an orchestrator, if it is a not other than queues, then we define the config sheet where we have a settings like yeah, retry number,
Okay.
maximum
So
retry number. Yeah.
can you please help us in creating a retry value? So you can guide Ullas.
Yeah.
Ullas, please open Orchestrator. Let Nagarjuna guide you. Sorry, Shankar guide you to create a. I think he can guide you. Just wait. Let's see.
Yeah, we can just put the orchestrator. Orchestrator.
Yes,
My
Rakesh.
yes, yeah, my workspace, and you have a queue, right? Existing queue or new queue. You can edit this existing queue. Edit here. Edit first one. No, video.
Sorry, I didn't hear you properly.
No, actually, you can edit the existing queue number, queue default price, yeah, maximum price. Here,
Should I create a queue again?
yeah, you have to create a queue again. Then, yeah.
Okay.
Can you go edit again here? Edit.
Yeah.
It's not coming. Uh, uh, Go to status again. Go back status.
Rakesh, your voice is not clear actually.
There is Shankar actually. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Am
sorry,
I clear
sorry.
now?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Am
yeah,
I clear? Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, I think it will be there in the process jobs. I think it will. I seen somewhere the session.
No, Shankar, you have to set
Ulash,
in a
can you
queue
go
itself.
to edit option again?
Okay.
Come
Scroll
down,
down.
down. Yeah,
Yeah,
here
Yeah.
you
yeah, yeah. Because yeah, okay, yeah. This is what I. Yeah. You can update or auto retry is no. That you can make it as a no. That button, radio button. You can make it as a no. No, it's not
Okay.
coming. I think. Yeah, I think yes only. But the button is not. Yeah, yes only. But I don't know why it's not coming. That update mode enabled. It's not enabled in update mode.
if you
Maximum
make
retry.
any changes
Uh,
in
so Shankar, I think you might be confused. If you want to add retry number, so
Yeah.
max retry numbers is what we need to add. Let's understand that it's more than one. So you
Yeah.
just need to add three here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Just make it a three actually. Yeah.
Rachel, one quick question.
yes, tell me.
So, for in queue concept, right, we can't manually um, give
You can't manually
it
delete
apart
what?
from here.
What you can't
No, we
delete?
can't change the number of we can't change the number of retries apart from orchestrator.
Yes, this is the place where we are using maximum number of retries.
So, in queues exclusively, right? It takes only from the queue settings. We can't
Exactly.
we can't override it from elsewhere.
No. because if you see that if you see in transaction dot read number, it takes it from this value. If you
Okay.
want to do some customization, you can update in the assets and all, but that's not required and that's not recommended as well, because we already have a place to update it, right? Why do you need to do it?
Okay.
Okay. Now there is an option called unique reference. Can anyone tell me what is unique reference?
It's like the primary key.
Actually, to get with the removing duplicate and just having only non-duplicate. This is used to remove the duplicates actually, duplicate transactions. Unique reference to this is means. No means it will allow duplicate transactions.
Okay. So whatever you have said is correct, but unique reference will take all the data. It's not only on one key item. It will take all the data. For example, a complete row will be taken as a item. Okay.
Yeah.
So just try to enable it once. But unique reference can be added only when you're creating the queue item, not after creating it.
Yeah, it's not working.
It's not allowing you to yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're creating it, only then you can add unique reference. Okay.
Okay, yeah, got it. Yeah.
Okay. Now,
The other place you can update this three. Update it. You can update. Ullas, you can update it.
click on update.
Yeah, click
Ajran,
on
can you
update.
tell Ajran, can you tell about unique reference again? When it is enabled?
Which one? Unique
Unique.
reference.
Yes.
Okay. Click on add new item, add queue. So now it is enabled. So whenever you're creating a new queue item, that's when it's enabled.
But this one actually, when you reading the data, it removes, or when writing the data.
Uh, what I didn't
The
get you.
unique
Like
the unique reference is set up like all transaction items will take it, not one row. It takes
when
all
you are
rows.
adding items to the queue, it will not allow you. Okay. So do one thing. Just add a name called calculator. There is a calculator queue, right, already, and add it with unique reference.
Yes, Vajran.
Okay, updated. Now there is a calculator code, right, where you are reading the items and you are updating it to queue. Just add that code, run that code.
I think the queue name is calculated data.
Yeah, but that's fine. You can change it manually.
Is there any key that we can, because we have only 3 columns here, okay, so if we have 20 columns, we can create a key set for.
It's not about the key, as I'm saying. It depends on the complete row.
Settings.
Just change the name to calculate like this. Okay, now add a breakpoint. No, stop it once. Go to initialization. Yep, scroll down. Add bulk queue items. You have it, right? Open that. Yeah, into all applications. Oh, yeah, first run. Scroll down. Yep. Add a breakpoint at add data info. Add a breakpoint over there.
Okay.
Debug the flow. Don't run it. Do a step into. Now, can you go back and check in the queue once?
Orchestrator queue.
Yeah, we need to see data in the orchestrator queue.
It's not showing data. It's not working, Vajra. I don't see the data.
Okay, can you open UiPath Studio once? Okay, so what is the name of that? Okay, click on stop and add items individually instead of adding it in bulk. There is an option to add items individually. Just check that. Click on add data to queue items. Add data to orchestrator queue. Click on that. Yeah. Process items man individually. Add all or nothing, right? Commit type. Just change it to individual.
Okay.
So this option is also adding the bulk records to the queue at a time.
So adding bulk records at take time. Yes, it will add one at a time. But when we add everything at once, then it will send it as a JSON request.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Debug it from the beginning.
So it has stopped.
Yeah, step into. Okay, this is completed. Now can you go to orchestrator and see the items once? Refresh on the right side. View transactions. Why things are not getting updated? Can you check in the logs once? Give me the access. Okay. Ullas folder path. Okay. Stop it. Let's take a simple workflow. Let's try. Maybe some issue, but let's try to figure out what's the issue. Add a sequence. Right click, add sequence. So in this sequence, we are adding only 2 items. Read range. So I'm going with a workbook activity here. So all I need is to map the values. So data, input, calculator data. So I'll remove everything. And add bulk queue items. Bulk queue items. So from here, let's take data, dt out. This will be dt out. And here we will give the name as calculator. Not sure why it's not working there, but let's see. From here, debug. Returned an invalid status code. Okay, let's also try to do one more thing. If that's not coming in, let's add a for loop. For each row in data table, and this takes an argument as our dt out. And here, let's add a value called add queue item. Okay, so what add queue item will do, instead of adding one item at a time, it will instead of adding all the items at a time, it will add only one. So let's see why and how things are not coming in correctly. But yes, let's go with a queue name. Queue name will be calculator. And item information, Let me take only one, and let's take A, and this will be uh, current item of 0, that's the 0th item dot toString. So for every row it will take the first column. Okay, let's delete and debug. Let's see. I think the problem is with adding unique reference. Okay, now things are getting added. Add queue item is faulted. Reference is required. Unique reference is required. Okay, so here is what we need to give. When we are getting with unique reference or reference ID, we need to give a unique reference value. So the item that you have said, like the key value that you want, that you can add it here. Row of 0, current row. Current row of 0 dot toString. So one of the drawback that if someone asks you while you're going with an interview is when we are using bulk queue items, let's see if we have any issue with bulk queue item, like if we have any reference value. So bulk queue items is not having a reference value. That's the reason it's failing. So where do we see this reference value? If you go into, okay, let it run. If you go into this place,
Hey guys, I'm not getting any voice.
yeah, can you open UiPath Studio once? Okay, we will retry. Now we have the items added up, right? We'll retry. So this is faulted. Duplicate reference or error code 106. So this particular reference value is what it is taking. Just go with items. Yes. So this is the reference ID that's coming in. If the reference ID is same, then it's not adding up the values. Okay, but using bulk queue items, we are not able to add because the reference ID is not selected over there. Got it? Any questions here?
Now, assume the reference ID, right? You are pointing to a specific a column item.
Yeah, it's a column item. That's it.
And, can you show where you have assigned this?
Okay, go to code and see in add queue item, there is a item called reference.
Vajran, Sudha here. What happens if the status goes to success? in status goes to
Yes,
success
okay.
and if you
That's a really good question. So, see, a reference item or unique item will always be unique. Okay. Let's go back and so this is a transaction item that we are using. So what I can do is I will use get queue items, and in get queue items I will add calculator. So I will get all the items that are available in this get queue items, and here you can see output items. And if you check with the for loop, so we are not adding a for each here, but we are using a for loop for each item. So if you see this particular item, the variable that is created is an I enumerable of queue items. Okay. To change this to work with queue items, you just need to update this to queue item. Okay. So let's see with queue item, UiPath system. That will be of type UiPath system. Yeah, queue item. UiPath core queue item. And let's give out items. And for each item, let's make a request. So when we are using get transaction, one item will be pulled in with. Okay, so what is the difference between get queue items and get transaction items? Can anyone tell me?
Get queue items will pull the all the queue items. Transaction item is like one item at a time.
Okay, what is the change with the queue items that we that we got?
It's it's a collection of queue items for get queue item. In get transaction is just type is queue item.
Okay, so one more difference is with get transaction item, if you are taking one queue item, it will be changed from new to in progress. Okay, let me just show you that. Breakpoint, debug. So if you just wait and watch. So in the next class, I will try to explain you locals, watch and immediate panel. But for now, just see items. There are 6 items that we have, and in that 6 items, every item will have a value. Like this is new item, this is a key value and all. But if you go back, can you go to orchestrator once? So if you just refresh, everything will be still in new state. Can you go to UiPath and do a step into? Step into. Let's do a step into. So we are picking up one item at a time, and this is picked up. And okay, we got one item, right? So if you see the item TI, that is with status queue item, assign to null and all, and we have ID reference. So if you see the reference that we got is 3. Okay, and let's see the status. What is the status now? In progress. So when we are using get queue items, that will be only we'll be receiving a collection of items. But when we are using transaction item, we are telling orchestrator that okay, I need one item to process. So that is the reason it is sending out with a status called in progress state. Can you go to orchestrator once? Now when we get a transaction item, the particular transaction item will change its state to in progress state. Can you go into UiPath? Now in UiPath, let's go ahead and use step into. We are setting its status to completed or successful. So go back to orchestrator. So when you just refresh this, this will be in success state. Okay. So as we continue, go to UiPath. Go to UiPath. So let me just continue it. Let's see. The transaction items will be closed. So all the items are completed, but the question that's asked is what if the item is successful, right? Because that is already completed, why shouldn't it add new item? So let's go ahead and debug it again. Let's see. So I know the answer, but how many of you can guess the answer? What is the answer?
I think here also unique reference should be available the properties or something that is
Exactly. So
available.
this is checking with this reference alone. So if the reference is already available in the queue, it's not adding it again. Got it? Okay, let's go back to UiPath. So that's with the queues. I also okay what we covered today. So all the items that we have covered today are very important. We covered about retry concept. We covered about without orchestrator queues how we can retry, and we discussed on the retry workflow, and we discussed on set transaction status, getting the transaction items, and getting queue items. What are the different properties? And how can we what is the difference between get queue items and get transaction item, and what is the reference item with unique item? So we covered many things today, and now any questions?
What is the difference between this for each row and for each item when we use and
Okay,
when we go?
so for each row by default it will point out to a data table. It accepts a data table. So this is the latest. In the latest version we are having this for each data table, but in earlier versions I think we also have this for each data table and for each data row. We have that, but if you use for each activity, that will be an object. That's not a data table. Okay. Next question.
Arjun, when you coming to the reference, right, over there you're pointing it as current row of 0th item, right?
Yeah,
So
you
it
can
is
point it
going,
to anything. That's not
so it is,
required that you should point it only to that one.
so in the data table, the first cell, first item, right, means the first cell in the Excel sheet.
Mhm.
That will be referred as the external, the unique reference, right?
Yeah,
That will be
that's taken
taken as
as a
the,
unique reference. Correct.
if I want a second column, I need to mention it as current row of one.
Row of one. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, we have 2 more minutes to complete this session. Please go ahead and complete your questions, please. Okay. Understanding that there are no questions, can you please stop the screen share? Ulas, can you please stop the screen share? Okay, so I'll be adding this recording to the meeting. Yesterday we did not record it, or at least that's not required to record. So this meeting we discussed many things. So I'll stop the recording now, and this will be updated